Now, there are two types of neuroglia in the peripheral nervous system. We have already seen the Schwann cells, which form the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. The other group of neuroglia in the peripheral nervous system is the satellite cell. Now, these cells surround neurons in the ganglia. The cell body of the neuron is surrounded by satellite cells. So, satellite cells provide support and nutrition to these neurons. Now, in this section, we shall discuss growth factors. Now, growth factors as well as cytokines, they are a group of signaling proteins. So, they are signaling molecules that control different types of cellular activities. They control growth and differentiation of cells as well as regulate processes such as inflammation, wound healing, and tissue repair. Now, they can exert these actions in an autocrine, paracrine, or endocrine manner. So, if a cell secretes a growth factor which acts on its own self, we call it autocrine. If the growth factor acts on cells in the immediate vicinity, we call that as paracrine. And if this growth factor is released into the bloodstream and it acts on a distant target tissue, then we call that as endocrine. Now, how do growth factors act? So they go to the target tissue and bind to specific receptors. So once there is binding of the growth factor to the receptor, a lot of signaling pathways are activated inside the cell. And finally, this brings about gene transcription. So this is how growth factors bring about their biological actions. Now, one growth factor can have different types of effects on different cells. Likewise, many different growth factors could have a common function. They could exert similar or overlapping functions. Now, the processes which are regulated by growth factors are diverse. So, as we already discussed, growth factors regulate cell division, cell growth, and differentiation. They also regulate many immunological and hematopoietic responses, and they're very important in the context of wound healing and inflammation. So all in all, they contribute to homeostasis. Now, why these are assuming great importance today is because of the surge in many diseases that we see. We hear a lot about cancer, autoimmune diseases, and many inflammatory diseases. So the abnormal production or regulation of growth factors is implicated in these diseases. So there is a lot of study going on in terms of how growth factors can contribute to these diseases and how we can therapeutically exploit them in the context of these diseases. Now, this is a diagram to depict the mechanism of action of growth factors. As you can see, the producer cell produces the growth factors, which then bind to specific receptors on the target cell. Now, this binding initiates a cascade of processes within the cell, which are referred to as signal transduction processes, which eventually activate gene transcription. As a result, some kind of protein is synthesized. It could be an enzyme, it could be a structural protein, and that is how the biological response of the growth factor is brought about. Now, several important families of growth factors have been recognized and classified. These have been presented in this slide, and you may recognize some of the names. Now, the first few, for instance, TGF-beta, PDGF, EGF, FGF, these especially participate in processes that involve cellular proliferation and differentiation, such as wound healing. Vascular endothelial growth factor is particularly important in the formation of new blood vessels, that is angiogenesis. Interleukins and interferons play a very important role in immune mechanisms. Now let's discuss the application or the utility of growth factors. Growth factors have extensive utility both in research studies and in clinical applications. So sometimes we use growth factors in cell culture models in order to understand and study signaling pathways. Now, growth factors have both preclinical and clinical applications. Some growth factors are used to stimulate the production of white blood cells in patients with cancer. Likewise, there are some diseases where immunotherapy is beneficial. For example, kidney cancer or advanced metastatic cancer. So immunotherapy works by boosting the body's immune responses, and it is promising in these diseases. So immunotherapy makes use of cytokines and growth factors. So in this section, we will discuss a specific entity called a nerve growth factor. We will see what a nerve growth factor is and what its functions are. So a nerve growth factor is a neurotrophic factor, which means it is absolutely necessary for the growth, maintenance, proliferation, and survival of neurons. This is especially important for sympathetic and sensory neurons, which could undergo apoptosis if NGF is withdrawn. Now, it is not only neurons that NGF influences, it has a lot of other functions. For example, withdrawal of NGF leads to apoptosis in pancreatic beta cells, which means that NGF has a role to play in the context of diabetes mellitus. So this is being explored in research. Likewise, NGF plays a very important role in both innate and acquired immunity. NGF is being investigated in the context of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, where currently therapeutic options are limited. Animal models have demonstrated that NGF prevents or reduces neuronal degeneration. Now, in the case of peripheral nerves, experiments on rats have demonstrated that NGF promotes regeneration. Also, in inflammatory diseases, NGF was noted to have suppressed inflammation. NGF also promotes myelin repair and therefore may be of value in the treatment of demyelinating diseases such as multiple sclerosis. NGF has been linked to various psychiatric disorders such as dementia, depression, and schizophrenia. Research has also suggested a possible link between dysregulation of NGF and Alzheimer's disease. That is the end of this section. Thank you.